You guys know what this video is about. Widowmaker is ruining the game. Usually, I would be a lot more hyped up, angry, but this hero is actually so mentally exhausting to play against. And Widowmaker has always been a problem. I just wanted to be completely clear that Widowmaker was also a big problem back in 6v6. So this isn't a problem that can be solved if we go back to 6v6. If anything, Widowmaker actually had a lot more going for her in 6v6. To anybody that played like at higher levels of play, you guys would remember even in the Overwatch League early on, like Widowmaker was being entered into dive comps just because of how good she was on zoning people out on maps, and that would actually help stage the dives, right? Whenever Widowmaker found a way into the game, it was like some of the worst metas that you can be in, especially if you remember when we entered the hook and cook meta, where you know well, you could call it so many different things. It was basically the Orisa Halt plus Hog Hook combo. And I just wanted to bring it to attention because people think like, oh, like Widowmaker is like only present in 5v5 and 6v6 she's be balanced. No, that's not the case. There's actually other problems that comes with her being in 6v6. Can she be tuned down in power in 6v6? For sure. Like, I'm not denying that, right? But it's like she was also there. Like, she was also strong in 6v6, but for different reasons. Now in 5v5, the reason she's so strong is because because there's one less tank, maps feel a lot more open. It feels like there's a lot less sightlines that are being blocked, which allows Widowmaker to kind of take over the game. Now, one of the things that pisses me off about the Widowmaker community, and a lot of these people, they're like silver glue sniffers that don't actually understand how to play the game. They say things like, if you just pick the X character and dive the Widowmaker, like the Widow will die. That's not how it works. That's not how it works. Like, the thing that annoys me when it comes to the Widowmaker argument is people don't realize that when you are playing with a team, honestly, you will see this as early as like early diamond, right? Like as soon as you enter diamond rank or even high plat, people will realize, especially right now, because Widow's pretty much the meta hero, like by far the best hero in the game. Widow, like your team starts to play around the Widowmaker. Your team starts to gather around and ensure that they can enable the Widowmaker. So usually what tends to happen is like supports will make sure that Widow doesn't die. The other DPS's job is to follow up on like the pressure that Widow is creating. Then on the other hand, your tank, like they will do their best to kind of be in this middle ground area where they can not only peel for Widow, but if Widow gets a pick, they can immediately bombard the enemy front line with the other DPS and just like tear apart that comp and go in. Widowmaker's impact on the game is an impact that no other hero can bring, because the moment this hero is picked, the moment she's in the lobby, everybody, including her own teammates, have to adjust to the way Widowmaker wants to play the game. There's no hero in this game that requires this much resources through or like attention, or I don't know what you want to call it, but there's no hero in the game that the moment that you pick this hero, like the whole lobby is forced to play your style of the game. Because if you don't, then the Widowmaker pick can potentially be a throw pick. Like, for example, you might have a good Widowmaker player, but if you as a tank, you as another DPS, you as a support, you're not enabling that Widowmaker pick, well, that's kind of your fault if the Widow's not getting picked, right? Let's say optimally speaking, the Widow's a good Widow player, but you aren't peeling for the Widow, so she's not able to draw out her fights. She's not able to create like the zoning pressure that she's supposed to bring, because of course if you peek her, the Widow will get the pick. There's so many problems that comes with Widowmaker that I want to discuss, right? Now, how do we get to this point? Whenever I make these videos, I talk about like how do we get to this point. The reason we've reached this point now is when you tone down breakpoints on a lot of the dive DPS characters, specifically dive DPS characters, what begins to happen is because weak points get weaker on DPS. For example, Genji's breakpoints have gotten weaker. Tracer's breakpoints have gotten weaker. She had 6 DPS per pellet, and now she's on 5.5. Genji's damage is at 27, the lowest it's ever been per shuriken, and things like that. Once you enter like a state like this, and then Sombra, like that's why I've always said like I have never minded Sombra's strength level. Because to me, Sombra has always been the final nail in the coffin that keeps Widowmaker from taking over this game. And the one season, there's a conspiracy theory that Overwatch is balancing around skins. I kind of want to talk about that in a separate video and bring up some arguments. But I do have my thoughts on this. But it is rather interesting that the season that Widowmaker gets her mythic is the season where not only she takes over the game completely, but it's the season where Sombra gets completely gutted. Now, we do have a balance patch coming out tonight, so expect a double upload by the time you see this video. I will be recording the balance patch, and then hopefully an hour or two after that will release. Um, Sombra's major problem, Sombra's like major impact against Widowmaker was because of permanent invis. Sombra could freely stage herself against Widowmaker in a way where you could delete her. And again, I've repeated this a million times, but the beautiful thing about Sombra countering Widow was Widow was one of the characters that you didn't need to hack because Widowmaker has relatively low HP compared to other characters in the game. All you had to do was just virus the Widowmaker. A lot of Sombras make this mistake where they begin hacking. You don't need to hack Widowmaker when you are beginning the process of hacking her. Not only because there's like a second's worth of downtime, she can interrupt your hack, and also she can just fly away with her, Spider-Man web swing or whatever. So the thing is the way you would approach Widowmaker is you'd like usually set up behind or to the side depending on the angle, and then you'd exit your perma invis with the virus, and the virus would apply the 20% damage increase or something like that, and then you'd melt her with the SMG that Sombra has, and that would annoy the crap of Widowmakers and force them to swap. So that's why like Widow didn't necessarily feel that terrible all the time. Now at the higher levels of play, Masters Plus, the way we would use Sombra up here is that usually the Sombra would get a stage, would stage herself in a position where like her dive tank can be ready to follow up, and just as she would exit the perma invis, the dive tank would make the dive, and then you guys would delete the Widowmaker, and usually there's a support nearby that's trying to peel for that Widow, so that support would go with it too, giving you an easy 2-pick advantage to start the fight. At least in my experience on European and Middle Eastern servers, whenever there's a Widowmaker, that's how we would deal with it, and it was like you had the tools to deal with. Now in this current season of Overwatch, it feels like there's legitimately no tool to deal with Widowmaker. Like you're forced to take the you're constantly forced to just take the Widowmaker mirror. Now, one character that could actually mirror the Widowmaker, like that could actually mirror the fact that he can snipe her on certain maps, was Hanzo. And Hanzo was like one of those picks even back in 6v6, back in Overwatch 1, where when you picked Hanzo, it was like, okay, if a Hanzo's good, if a Hanzo can get set up, maybe, and we can enable him, although granted it's a little bit harder because he's projectile, maybe the Hanzo can outsnipe Widowmaker. But because of Hanzo's smaller projectile size, he has like the no projectile size buff, while Widowmaker still has the projectile size buff, right? So Hanzo, like, he's already at a disadvantage at that regard. Not only that, but the slower draw speed, he has a slower draw speed than Widowmaker. And not only that, the recovery time in between, Widowmaker can charge up her next shot faster and shoot faster than Hanzo, way before like Hanzo can actually charge up the next arrow and then line up the next shot, giving Widowmaker so much advantage. So it's crazy. Like, we genuinely have nerfed every soft and hard counter to Widowmaker to a point, at least in terms of the DPS role, where Widowmaker can completely take over the game. Again, remember, my point here is that Tracer's weak points are weak. Because remember, guys, like, it's not like when you just jump on the Widowmaker in the current state of the game, like, you'll usually get the free kill. The enemy team, again, I'm thinking about the optimal scenario, because that's where the frustration comes in. Obviously, if it's a bad Widow who's out of position and shit like that, you're gonna exploit them and win the game, right? Usually, like, at least what's happening for me in my ranked games, what's going on is we try to jump the Widow, we try to take her out, but she just, like, her teammates are nearby, she gets healed up. The damage on the characters that you're trying to play to deal with Widow are just so weak and pathetic against the AoE healing in the game, the sustain in the game, that Widow will tend to survive. Her Diva will peer for her, boop you away, and all this type of stuff. So that's kind of one of the things I wanted to discuss. It's like, it's such a frustrating argument when like gold, like, Widowmaker players are gonna sit there and tell you like, it's okay, just dive Widow. It's like, bro, like, I'm sorry, but there's this thing called counter diving, there's this thing called peeling. I understand that you don't see it in like gold and silver, but like at least diamond plus people understand this concept that, okay, we should play around and help our teammates to win the game, since it is a team-based game. I know, like, major shocker to a lot of these glue sniffing Widowmaker players, but what can you do? So how do we approach Widowmaker? Well, there's two ways to approach it. Number one, we don't do anything to Widow, because again, when it comes to balancing the game, I want every hero to be in a spot where they're playable. Now, to be fair, the Widowmaker problem is prominent now because, in my personal opinion, a lot of the DPS characters that could put pressure on her, that could deal with her, are not that relevant in the game right now. Hanzo and Genji are like, like, Genji's good, he's not bad, but he really does struggle against like breakpoint interactions. Same thing with Trace. It's like, Tracer's not that bad of a Widowmaker counter too, but if it's a vertical map, you're screwed. Sombra is a joke right now, so I don't think I need to explain that. So it's kind of like, it's either we buff her like soft counters that can pressure her out better, okay? Or what we do is we see, like, approaching Widowmaker is really tough because she's already been nerfed and accounted for, but in my personal opinion, the best way to nerf her without guttering the character, is I don't want any character to be gutted, right? Like, Widowmaker's massive problem is like Ashe. She was supposed to be reworked into an Ashe-like character, and the problem is the devs already made Ashe, so now Widowmaker just has to be the sniper. It's really difficult dealing with the Widowmaker problem, so I understand the situation there. So my compromise is this: if one-shots, even though they said that they want to tone it down, if we're gonna keep one-shots in the game, in terms of Widowmaker, revert her bullet size back to what it was pre-season 9. Why is it that a character like Hanzo, who uses projectiles, which arguably projectiles are harder to use, even though they put the restriction on Hanzo as well that it takes longer to charge up the shot, why can't we put these same restrictions on Widowmaker? Make it harder for her to charge up the shot, take it a little bit more time, and reduce the projectile size. So if she lands the shot, she's critically being rewarded after all the disadvantages being put on her. Because I said the same thing for Hanzo, that Hanzo is being put into such a disadvantageous scenario that if you are popping off on Hanzo, you kind of deserve it. So why not do the same for Widowmaker? Now, I know there's an argument that Widow's HP is already in a spot where, you know, if you just get on her. Yeah, but to be fair, it's again, like I said, like, you have to think about not just Widow alone, but the game around her. That's why, so, you know, I didn't necessarily discuss tanks, because, you know, there are tanks that can pressure Widow too. For example, Wrecking Ball. For example, a D.Va, a D.Va on your team, a Winston. Like, you can definitely play the dive tanks and try your best to pressure out the Widowmaker. But there's also advantages and disadvantages to that. If your dive tanks are overcommitting to the Widowmaker and trying to really pressure her out, you're actually leaving your front line, like your DPS and your back line, completely open to the enemy comp. So then the question becomes, is it worth really doing that if we're losing our backline every fight to the enemy tracer just because we're trying to chase the enemy Widowmaker, you know, on a map like like on Ilios Ruins or something like that? Because that's a problem that you begin to run into, is that the enemy, the way they start countering your dives to your Widow is Widow just grapples away because it's so she can go so far, it's omnidirectional. And what ends up happening is when while you commit, like, let's say I'm Genji, I have a D.Va, and then, like, I have a tracer, and we're trying to commit to that dive that, okay, let's deal with Widowmaker. Well, she just zip lines out of there onto a high ground that none of us can reach for a few seconds. And because we did that, because we definitely, like, overcommitted or something like that, what's happening in our back is we've left our supports wide open, and now they're isolated. And, like, because so many of us try to go for one character, depending on the situation, obviously context is important. Overwatch is a game where context is always all over the place. But typically what tends to happen at the higher levels of play is when you commit all these cooldowns, it's either you get blown up, or what happens is your backline is left wide open, and any smart a player will just simply sidestep your current positioning, look for your backline, and delete them from the game because you've left them wide open. Now, this is where your backline would have to play really carefully, but, like, let's say you have Ana, you got Baptiste. If they need to maintain sightlines, Brigitte, Iliari, like, they will try to poke up and walk up as well, and that, again, puts them in a bit more of a dangerous position. So, again, like, this just shows, like, how much of a silent impact Widowmaker has on the game. So again, like, the way I also see it is, like, yes, there's still ways where you can soft counter Widowmaker. Like, yes, you can pick D.Va, Winston, you can go dive. If the team that's playing around the Widowmaker is bad at peeling for her, is bad at, like, looking out for her, for sure you'll be able to take her out. But the problem is the higher up you go, the more people learn how to play the game at the skill ceiling, the more people have better awareness, better game sense. They start to understand how to, you know, ready themselves for these scenarios. People start to understand how to best utilize their win condition. This is the important thing. Like, Widowmaker on her own is a win condition. Usually in Overwatch, a good team push or a good, like, combo ult or a good ultimate in general is considered a win condition to play around. But Widowmaker as a whole character is a win condition, and if your team is enabling that, you're going to dominate the game. So, you know, Widowmaker is definitely a problem. There's multiple ways to approach her, but I don't think maybe giga buffing the rest of the game to pushing Widowmaker to irrelevancy is the solution. I do believe that perhaps if the logic is to be consistent, that the way that they created many disadvantages for Hanzo's one shot, I would say do the same thing to Widowmaker. Widowmaker's projectile size goes back to pre-season 9 and increase the charge up time on her sniper rifle, and then maybe you can tighten the spread on her SMG to compensate, because most likely she's going to be using the SMG more often from now on. So it'll help the hero feel better. She'll definitely have to earn her shots, and not every, you know, Tom, Dick, and Harry in gold will be able to play Widow just because she has a bullet that's the size of the fucking sun. So that's just my opinion on it, everybody. I would love to hear your opinions on Widow. Like I said, I really wanted to be a lot more aggressive about this, but honestly, I've been playing non-stop against this hero in quick play and ranked. It's gotten really tiring to the point that, you know, I started learning Widow just to take the mirrors or just to play the character, because, not gonna lie, you know, at the end of the day, being a server admin is really fun when nobody can do anything about it, right? Like, I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. It is nice to have a DPS character that's broken, but I am always fair. I've always been fair, regardless of role, regardless of character. My philosophy is I want the heroes to be in a better spot, but not necessarily be overly broken. And I do think that my approach to Widowmaker can bring her to that point, and if she still is a problem, then I definitely think the balance team needs to fully reconsider completely changing Widowmaker, because at that point the characters, like, it, as much as I hate to say it, I think Widowmaker is by far the biggest standout of a character that perhaps doesn't belong in a game like Overwatch, and they really need to reconsider what to do and rework her. So anyways, that's going to be it for the video. If you enjoyed this type of content, one more, like and subscribe. We got tons of videos coming out this week talking about a buff Soldier 76 video and my honest thoughts on the season coming tomorrow. So if you want to check out those videos, they're coming very soon. And again, double upload today, a balance patch coming out later tonight. We'll react, we'll talk about it as per usual. So see you then.